In this lecture, we're going to design the home screen of our mobile app. As you can see, I already created a new file and I added this little section with all the colors included in the app, so that they are easily accessible with the color picker and they can be used immediately in our design. Once you have defined the color scheme of your app or website, it's always a good practice to keep all the colors in a similar list, which is accessible all the time on your canvas. One more thing I did is to save all the primary colors in this section below the color picker. We will use these colors very often, and having them here will make our work even faster. I didn't save the secondary colors here as they will be used only once or twice in the whole app, so there's no reason to. Okay, so we're gonna start creating an artboard for our home screen. I'm gonna do this by selecting the artboard tool, or letter A, and selecting an iPhone 6 or 7 resolution. So we have our artboard here. We're gonna move it down below our colors. And now we can add the background image, which I saved already to my computer. And we can just drag it from Finder onto the canvas. As you can see, it's a bit too big, so we need to use the handles here at the corner of the photo and resize. Then we're gonna move it back. And resize it like this, center it a little bit. And that looks good, I think. So now we need to add the status bar on top of the screen here. We can get it right away from here. Basically, we're gonna open an Apple iOS UI kit, which is available out of the box in Adobe XD. We're gonna zoom in and get one which is with white text. We're gonna select it, then copy, go back to our main screen and paste. For some reason it pasted over here, but we're gonna drag it and put it back up like this. Next, we need to create our logo. So we're gonna use the text tool with the letter T. I'm gonna spell out the name of the app, which is gonna be Hooked, just an imaginary name I came up with for this app. I'm going to change the text to white, increase the size a bit, and first of all, actually, we need to change the font, which is called Intro. Intro inline. Actually, let's put down the font size a little bit, and then we center it by dragging and following the purple line appearing in the center. Okay, so now we're gonna add a little subtitle under our logo. We're gonna use the text tool again and just write some random text. Gonna change the color to white, and this time we're gonna use a different font, which is called Lato, which is a great Google font. You can get it for free on the Google font website. I'm gonna move it here and probably lower down the font size a little bit to about 15 pixels, and we're going to center it as well. Okay, so now we can create our buttons. To do that, we're gonna use the rectangle tool, or letter R. I'm gonna draw a rectangle of about 250 by 50. We can change the size here on the right panel. We're going to remove the border, and we're going to round up the edges of the rectangle to about 10 pixels. Oops. I'm going to move it down here, and we also need to change the fill color to our pink that we already saved previously, like that. So now we're going to add some text on top of the button. To do that, we're going to duplicate this piece of text here by holding the Alt key and dragging down. As you notice, this is behind the button, so we need to, in the layer panel, we need to move this text up. Then we're going to change the text to something like sign up now. And we're going to make it bold and probably lower down the size a little bit, and then move it at the center of the button. So now in the layers panel here on the left, we can group these two layers so that we're only gonna have one layer group for this button. We select them in the layers panel and we're gonna hit Command G, and as you can see there's a new group here which we're gonna call button 1. Actually, let's tidy up a little bit our layers panel. We're gonna rename this into button background. The text can say the same. We're gonna move the status bar on top and the logo and the subtitle between the status bar and the button as well. The background photo can remain the same, and actually we're going to lock it by using the little lock icon right here, so that if we click on it, it's not gonna get moved around. So now we're gonna get our button here. We're gonna select it and duplicate it and drag it at the bottom, leaving about 15 pixels between this one on the top and the one at the bottom. We're going to change the text to login. We're going to center it as well, and we're going to change the color using this color here, which we're gonna get by using the color picker. There we go. Now we can select both of the buttons and drag them down a little bit towards the bottom of the screen, and probably move down a little bit the title, the logo, and the subtitle. And this is our home screen. In this lecture, we're going to create the login screen for our app. To do that, we're gonna duplicate the current home screen we designed in the previous lecture, and we just put it next to it. Actually, let me rename the name of each artboard so we don't get confused. Alright, so on our login screen we're going to select every element that we have and we're going to remove it. Next thing we're gonna do is use the rectangle tool to create a new rectangle exactly the same size of the artboard. We're going to remove the border, and then we're going to use this feature, which is the background blur. We're going to activate it here, and as you can see, this whole layer just creates a blur on top of the background image that we had. And by using these options down here, we're just gonna make it a bit heavier. As you can see, if I go down, it's almost not there at all. If I go all the way to 50, it creates a nice blur, which looks quite cool. Next, we're gonna create some text as the title of the screen. We're gonna change again to Lato, back to white, and increase a little bit the font size all the way to 40. And also we're gonna have a light weight. I'm gonna zoom a little bit. We're gonna put it all the way to the left side of the screen, and then using Shift and the right arrow key, we're gonna hit it for 2, 3, 4, 5 times, so that we have a 50 pixels exact margin from the left side of the screen. Now we're going to create the first field of our login form. So once again, we're going to duplicate this piece of text here, and all in capital letters. I'm gonna name it email address. Obviously we need to make some changes, probably even smaller, about 14 pixels. And let's bump up the weight to regular. And let's make sure that this is properly aligned with the text on top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Also, we forgot to lock this layer here, the blur, and let's also rename it. And the status bar as well. We forgot to move it on top. Alright, so now we're gonna have an email address just below here. And we're gonna put down the opacity to about 70% so that we have some nice contrast here. And then we need a little line here just below the email address. To do that, we're going to select the line tool and we're going to draw a line of 275 pixels so that we have 50 pixels on the left and 50 pixels on the right. Just the color is not right. Let's put it to white, and then let's play with the opacity and put it down to about 30%. Okay, so now we're going to select all these three elements here and we're going to group them. Once again, Command G, and we have a new layer group here which we're gonna call field 1. We're gonna tidy up a little bit. Okay, so now we select this group and we're just going to duplicate it, and maybe let's move it a little bit closer to the field on top. So we're going to rename this password, and then we're going to get rid of the email address here, and instead we're going to use some circles, which is like when you mask the password, you don't want to show it to the user. So to do that, we're going to use the ellipse tool, letter A. Let's zoom in a little bit, and we're going to create a perfect circle by using shift, by holding the shift key, and let's make it about 8 pixels diameter. As you can see up here, we're going to remove the border, and then we're going to use one of the coolest features in Adobe XD, which is the repeat grid, which is up here. We're going to select it, and then we're going to drag this little handle here towards the right side of the screen, and we're going to create about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 little circles here. And then when you hover with the mouse in the space between each circles, you're going to be able to decrease the space between them. Let's do it to about 6, 7 pixels, something like that. And let's see how it looks. Okay, some adjustments. We're gonna select this again and align it to the text on top. Also, let's play with the opacity all the way to 70, like the email above. And probably still we need to move it up a little bit. So now we just need to create our login button. To do that, we're going back to our home screen and simply copy and paste back into our login screen the sign up now button, which will transform a little bit. So we're going to make it a bit smaller, about 100 pixels, and we're going to center the text back here and just use login as the main text. We're going to drag this up, something like this, maybe a little more. Okay, now we need the forgot password link. So we're gonna select the text tool, and we need to change the font again down to about 13 pixels. We're gonna make it white, and then we're going to play with opacity to make it a little bit less prominent. About 70% could work, and we try to align it on top with the line on top, and on the left side with the center of the login button. Okay, so now we're gonna add at the bottom of the screen a little link to sign up for those users who don't have an account. So with the rectangle tool, we're going to create a rectangle here at the bottom. about 40 pixels, maybe a bit bigger. We're going to remove the border and make it a dark gray, something like this, and align it all the way at the bottom. And then we're gonna play with the opacity and tune it down to about 30%. And now we're just going to copy this piece of text here and paste it and put it on top. We're going to raise the opacity all the way to 100% just to make it more visible, and we're going to edit the text. And we're going to center it in the very middle. Alright, so now we need to create a little back icon, which is an arrow that we're going to place on top of the screen here for users to be able to go back to the home screen. So once again, we're going to use the rectangle tool, and actually we're just gonna zoom in to see clearly what we're doing. So we create a sort of a rectangle about this size. We remove the border and we round up the corners, something like this. So once we have that, we're going to rotate it by holding the Shift key, and we're rotating it by 45 degrees, as you can see here on the right panel. Then we're going to duplicate this, and again using the Shift key we're going to rotate it again. We're going to move it all the way down here so that when it snaps and it creates a nice curve like this, and then we're going to select again on this shape and we're going to duplicate it again. We're going to move it at the center, rotate it again by 90 degrees, and then join this shape all together with the other ones. And we're probably going to make this a bit longer so that it looks more like an arrow. Once this is done, we're just going to select all the 3 layers we created, and we're going to hit this button, which is the add function, which basically merges all those shapes and creates one unique shape that you can reuse in your design. And we're going to move it all the way to the top, about 20 pixels from the left border. Now let's have a look at our layers panel here. We probably need to tidy up a little bit because it looks a bit messy. So the status bar on top, login text. We're going to rename the layer for the arrow. This goes at the bottom. We're going to group it. And then we have the 2 fields, field 1 and rename field 2. And we're going to move them below the login title. And then the button here. Okay, that looks much better. I guess we should move down the login title a little bit so that it's closer to the other fields, and probably just select everything and move a little bit everything to the bottom so that it's better vertically centered. And that's about it. Here's our login screen, and I guess I'll see you on the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to create our sign up screen, which is very similar to what we've done in the previous lecture with the login screen. So we're just going to duplicate the login screen here by using Alt and click and drag. So let's rename the screen Then what we can do is to first of all get rid of this section at the bottom. Then we're going to move this title on top and we're going to rename it. And then we can take these elements here, move them at the bottom about here, and we can select these two fields and duplicate them, drag them on top, and now we just have to rename a few fields like here. Some random name here. I'm going to change the age field. Now we need to get rid of the little dots down here and replace it with some text, which we're gonna copy from here. And we're just gonna move down this layer. Okay. And then we need to make these changes to the bottom. Center it. And align everything. And as a last thing, let's just tidy up the fields a little bit, the layers, sorry. I'm gonna rename to number 2, number 3, field number 4, the last one. And here we go, our sign up screen is done. In this lecture, we're going to create the browse screen for our app. It's gonna be a little more complicated than the screens we've designed so far, so here's a little preview for you guys. We're just gonna delete it now so that we can design it starting from scratch. Alright, so we get rid of this artboard and we move down here below our home screen and just create a new one. Right away we can change the feel of this artboard by using the light gray we already saved here in our color palette. There you go. And now using the rectangle tool, we're gonna draw a rectangle which is gonna have a height of 64 pixels. This is the standard size for a header on an iOS device. We are gonna remove the border and we're gonna add a little subtle shadow at the bottom of it. We just use a little blur here. As you can see, it creates a nice little shadow at the end of the header. And now we just need to lock this layer. We select it and we hit Command L, and we need to add the status bar. As always, we're gonna get it from the Apple iOS UI kit. This time we're gonna get a black one. Copy and paste, back to our canvas. Here it is. Okay, so now we need to create a little hamburger menu, which we see very often in mobile apps. To do that, we're going to use our rectangle tool as usual. We're going to create a rectangle about this size here. We remove the border and we make it of this color that we saved already here. And we also change border radius, make it more roundy. Okay, so we have this one, and now we're gonna select it, and we're gonna use again the repeat grid feature, and we're going to create 3 of them. We adjust the distance between each of the elements down to about 3 pixels. Then we select this again and we ungroup the grid so that we can make some changes to only one of the elements. We're going to zoom again, and we're just going to make the little one in the middle a bit shorter, something like that. That looks good, and we're just going to select all of them and use this little add feature to make it one unique shape that we can reuse later. Actually, let's just move it all the way to the left side of the screen, and then holding the shift key again, we're gonna move it twice so that there's a 20 pixels margin from the left side of the screen. Also, we need to rename the layer into hamburger icon. So now we can add some text on top here as the title of the screen. Change the font again, the color, and the size to 16 pixels, and also the font weight to a nice bold. I'm gonna center it and move it down a little bit so that it's also aligned with the hamburger icon we just created. Okay, so now we need to create our chat icon, which is gonna be positioned right here. So let's zoom in a little bit, and using our ellipse tool, we're going to create an ellipse of about this size here. Remove the border, change the color to our dark gray, and now we're gonna use the pen tool, which you can activate with the P key on the keyboard, and we're going to create another shape which then we're going to merge with the current ellipse here. So we're going to click once within our ellipse, then outside, then inside, and then we're going to merge it here so that it creates like a sort of a triangle. And once again, we remove the border, change the fill, and as you can see, we have a little bubble icon created. I'm gonna select both of these shapes and merge them again. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna create a little unread counter, which is gonna be placed on top of this icon here. So we're gonna get our rectangle tool, remove the border, we're gonna change the color to our little pink that we have saved here already, and we're gonna round up the corners, and then we're gonna create some text on top of it with the number of unread messages, just a random number. I'm gonna change the font to Lato again, put down the size quite a bit and make it very bold. Change to white and position it in the very middle of the counter. That looks good. We're gonna select everything, move it to the right edge of the screen, and then move it back to the left by 20 pixels. 1, 2. And align it down here. Okay. Alright, so now we're gonna create the photo frame, which is gonna sit here in the middle of the screen. To do that, we're gonna use our rectangle tool and draw a rectangle of about this size. Okay, we're gonna move it to the center and all the way to the top. and then move it down by 10, 20, 30, 35 pixels. I'm gonna change the border color to a little light gray, about this. And we're gonna add a little shadow, a bit more subtle than that. Something like that. Okay, so now we need to create the portion where actually the photo of the user is displayed. We're going to duplicate this rectangle here. Command D. Let's change the color. Remove the border, remove the shadow. And now by pressing Shift, Alt on the keyboard and dragging, we're going to reduce the size of the square on top to something like this. And now we just need to add our photo, which we're gonna get from Finder, where I already have a photo of a guy saved. All these photos I get them from pexels.com, which is a great site for free stock images. In Adobe XD it's pretty cool because you can just drag a photo into a square and it's gonna fill it up and center it perfectly. Okay, so now we're gonna try to give some more depth to the frames, and we're gonna try to duplicate this one. Command D again. We're gonna move it down in the layers panel, and by using the handle here we're just gonna rotate it a little bit to about this. And then once again, Command D, we duplicate it again, we grab it, move it down, and rotate it on the other side. As you can see, the effect is quite cool. It looks like there's a photo, like Polaroid, stacked on top of the other. Okay, so now let's tidy up a little bit our layers panel here. We're gonna rename this screen as the browse screen. Then we're gonna go back into our screen and we're gonna select all the elements that we have in the header. Command G, and we're gonna group them. We're gonna rename this as the header layer group. We're gonna move the status bar on top, header on top, and then all of this are all layers related to our image frames in the center. So we're just gonna select them all, Command G, and group them. I'm gonna call it photo frame. Okay, so now we're gonna create the little section at the bottom where we're gonna have all the content like username, age, and the buttons. So we're going to use our rectangle tool and create a rectangle that goes a little beyond the borders of our artboard, because we only want our top border to be visible, not the other ones. So we're gonna change the color to a little subtle gray, something like this. Let's zoom in a little bit. And now we're gonna create a little curve here. And to do that, first of all, we need to create ourselves a little guide, as so far Adobe XD still doesn't have any guides. So we're gonna create it ourselves and center it by drawing just a simple line like this and put it in the center. Let's actually make the square a little smaller, about this size. Okay, so now we're gonna select the rectangle and double click on it. By doing this, you're gonna enter the edit mode of a shape, where you can make basically changes to anchor points and stuff like this to just, as you can see, change the shape itself. So we are going to hover on this little point at the very center of our top border of the rectangle. As you can see, there's a little pen icon appearing. That means that the pen tool is now active, and if we click on it, we're gonna create a new anchor point. And now if we drag this anchor point, obviously following the line which we created to act as a guide for us to be properly centered, we basically modify the shape and create a little angle. And then if we double click on it, this angle will become a curve, which is exactly what we wanted. Cool, so we can just select the shape we created and lock it using Command L. And then we're going to select the line that we used as a guide and just get rid of it, as we're not gonna need it anymore. We're gonna rename the layer to content section. Okay, so now we can add our text. As usual, it's Lato. Bump up the size a bit and change the font weight. Change the color to our dark gray. And we center the text. Now we're going to duplicate this text. Make it smaller to about 13 pixels. And we're gonna change it to some default text. We're gonna center it and play with the opacity to make it a little bit less prominent. 80% is good. Now we can move on and create our buttons, which are gonna be circles basically. So with our ellipse tool, I'm gonna create some perfect circle by holding the shift key and click and dragging. I'm gonna make it about this size. And we need to change the color, and actually we're gonna use one of the gray colors that we saved right here. So we're gonna hit Command 0 to see the full view of our canvas, and using the color picker we're just gonna pick this color here. Then we're gonna go back down, remove the border, and now we need to create the little cross icon which is gonna be placed inside this button. So to do that, we're gonna move a little bit outside of our artboard and use the rectangle tool to draw a little rectangle here. Going to change the size a little bit and change the border radius, remove the border, and now we're going to use the handles here and rotate this rectangle by 45 degrees. Then we're going to duplicate this and rotate it on the other side so that we have a nice little cross. We're gonna select both the layers, merge them into one unique shape, and move it back to our artboard, where we're going to center it right in the middle of our button. Now we're gonna select both these layers and group them together. Rename the layer group to button 1. And now we can duplicate this layer, this button, sorry. We're going to select the circle, change the fill, and we can select the cross and just get rid of it, because now we need to create a little heart icon which is gonna be placed inside this button here. So we go back outside of our artboard and we're going to create a rectangle, actually a square, using the rectangle tool. 20 pixel, something like this. We remove the border and zoom a little bit. So now we rotate the square by 45 degrees again. And now we're going to select the ellipse tool and create a perfect circle, 20 pixel diameter. Remove the border and move this exactly here, like this. And then duplicate it, Command D, and drag it to the right side to form a nice little heart, which we're going to select in its entirety, group all together to form just one unique shape, and we're gonna put it back into our canvas. and center it right in the center of the button. Let's go and rename our heart icon and move it down in the same layer group as the pink button, which we're going to rename into button 2. Let's move back up these layers, move this up, and maybe unlock this for a second and move it slightly upwards. Okay, so we can lock it again now. And let's move this button a little bit here next to the other one so that we can fix the positioning. So now that they're close to each other, we're gonna move it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 pixels from the other one. Then we're gonna select them both and center them. Move them down a little bit. And actually, let's select the text as well. Move it down a little bit. And yeah, so the last thing I think we need to do is to add the little favorites button, which is down here. So we're going to create another circle. This time it's going to be 40 pixels, about 30 pixels. We're going to center it, remove the border, change the fill to our blue we have here. And we just need to add a little favorites icon, which we're going to find in one UI kit that Adobe created when they launched Adobe XD. And this can be downloaded for free from the Adobe website. And we're just gonna get a little start from here so that we don't have to design it from scratch. And we're going to copy and paste it back to our artboard, make it a bit bigger, and change it to white. And properly center it. Like that. And let's just clean up for one last time our layers panel. And that's it. Our browse screen is done, and I guess I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to create the sidebar menu, which you see right here. This is going to be accessible every time users will tap on this hamburger icon on top of the screen. Alright, so we're just going to get rid of this so that we can start from scratch. First thing to do is duplicate the screen here with Alt and click and drag. Then in the layers panel, we're just gonna unlock these two layers and then select all of these layers included in the artboard. And we're going to hit Command L to lock them all, as you can see here. So we're doing this so that none of them are selectable, whatever actions we take on top. So now we're gonna create a rectangle, which is gonna go over this. We're gonna change the fill to black and remove the border. Oops. And we're going to tune down the opacity to about 40%. And actually what we can do now is go back to our layers panel and unlock all the layers so that we can group them in one unique folder called background layers. And then we're gonna lock it all so that all of this is not movable anymore. Okay, so now rectangle tool again, and we're going to create a new rectangle about 280 pixels wide, and we're going to lock it as well. Now we're gonna select the ellipse tool. We're gonna create our little placeholder for the user photo that we're gonna have here. 90 pixel is fine. We're just gonna change the fill to a random color, change the border, move it all the way to the top, and move it down to about 35 pixels. Make sure it's centered. Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna add a little picture here, which we already saved. We can find it in Finder, this picture here. This time I'm not just gonna drag it in the middle of the shape, because I want to select the portion of the picture which is gonna be visible. So I'm just going to drag it out somewhere outside of our artboard, like here. I'm gonna get this and drag it into our artboard, and then I'm gonna select this picture, and then with the Shift key I'm gonna select also the ellipse, which is in the background, and then Object, and we're gonna select Mask with Shape. And as you can see, the photo is masked by the circle that we have in the background. And now I can choose which part of the photo I want to be visible in the middle of the circle. If I want, I can also resize the photo or decrease the size of it, but for now I'm fine with the size we have. So I'm gonna just select very center of the girl's face, and I think this looks good. Okay, so now we're gonna add the username here, just a random name. Change to Lato, increase the size a little bit, and use a light font size, font weight, and we're gonna use our dark gray as usual for important text. Now we're going to duplicate this text, Alt click and drag. I'm gonna make it much smaller to about, actually let's first put it in bold, and we put it down to 11 pixels, and we're gonna use our pink and center it. Move them up a little bit maybe. Alright, now we can draw a little line here as a separator, about this size. Let's center it and put down the opacity about this, and let's position it properly. So we put it all the way till here, and then move it down 10, 20, 30, let's say 40 pixels. Actually, yeah, 30 looks better. Okay, so now we're gonna start creating the menu items for our navigation menu. So we're gonna start by grabbing some icons here, and we're gonna get it from an icon font which is called Font Awesome. You can find it on this website here, and it's pretty cool because you can basically install a certain font on your machine, and by copying and pasting all of these icons here into your application, you're just gonna generate an icon which is completely vectorial, and you're gonna be able to resize it and use it in whichever way you want. So in our case, we're just gonna need an icon for the browse menu item, and in this case we're probably gonna need some users in the icon. So we have one right here at the bottom where there's a bunch of users, and the only thing we need to do is to select it and then copy it, come back to XD, use our text tool, and just paste it as normal text. As you can see, there's this little icon which is a bit weird, and it probably tells you that there's no font corresponding to this character. So you just come back here and change the font to Font Awesome, which we previously installed on our machine. And here it is. We have our icon here, which, by the way, we can enlarge and change the size. So one thing we're gonna do at this point is select the icon and do Object, and then Path, and Convert to Path, so that right now we have like a full path editable like a normal shape basically. Okay, so now let's zoom in a little bit, and we're going to position our icon. Actually, first of all, we need to decrease the size a little bit. It's a little too big, so about this size. Then we're gonna move it all the way to the top where we have our line and put it down by 30 pixels. and also from the left side, which is already 30 pixels, it seems like. 1, 2, 3, yeah. Now we're gonna add some text. We're just gonna duplicate this and probably reduce the size to about 20 pixels. And obviously rename it. Okay, so we're gonna select these two layers, oops, and group them together. I'm just gonna rename the layer folder. And now with this folder selected, we're just gonna activate the repeat grid feature. And we're going to drag down this handlebar so that we have 5 menu items. And now if we hover in the space between the items, we can change the space between them. About this should be good. And now we can change the text of each individual item. As you can see, it's not visible fully, but we're gonna fix this very soon. Okay, to fix that, we just need to drag the handlebar here again and change the space like this. Okay, so now the full text is visible. Let's see how it looks. Alright, so now what is left to do is we need to change each individual icon. And to do that, we're just gonna ungroup the repeat grid so that we have individual menu items that we can change separately. And actually I just realized that somehow I removed the username up here. So let's just duplicate this and fix that. Bump up the size a bit. And here it is back. Sorry about that. Alright, so let's go back to our icons. We're going to remove this one. And instead we're gonna grab the icon that we have here, the bubble one. And we're going to select the union layer group that we have here. We're gonna copy it, come back here, and we're gonna paste it. Actually, let's rename it as well. I got pasted up here, so we're just gonna grab it, drag it down. We're going to resize it to about the same size of the other icons. And change the color by picking the same one that we already have. Alright, for my matches, we're just gonna grab the same icon that we have here, the art icon. So once again, copy and paste. It's been pasted here. Let's change the color right away so we can see it. We're gonna select this icon, remove it, grab this one, make it smaller, and just align it properly. And actually we need to include this icon within the same group, so which is here. And let's do the same for the bubble icon, which we left out, and it's down here next to messages. Okay, so the next icon to get rid of is the one for favorites. And instead we're just gonna get this star here, which we used previously. Gonna copy it and paste it back here. Let's change the color. Resize it a little bit. and align it again. And also include it in the same folder. And now the last one is settings, which once again we need to grab from Font Awesome. And we're gonna look for some cogs. There you go. You just select it, come back to XD, select the text tool, paste it, and once again change the font to Font Awesome, and there we go, you have this nice little icon. So we're gonna select the existing one, drag this up. First we need to convert it to path, and then we're gonna resize it. And now we're gonna align it to the other icons on top and rename the layer and move it back down to the proper folder. Looks quite good. Actually, let's select all our menu items and move them down a little bit, like that. And one other thing I just realized is that we kept the border for this white panel here, which we need to remove. So let's relock the layer, and we need to change the name of the artboard. And as a final touch, we're just gonna create a little section at the bottom here for our logo. So we're gonna draw a rectangle. We're gonna change the color to our pink, remove the border, and make it a little bit thinner to about 70 pixels. Alright, so we're gonna move back up to our home screen. We're gonna grab the logo, select it, copy it, and paste it back down here. Let's just make it a little smaller, and we're just gonna center it like that. Alright, so our sidebar menu is done, and I guess I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to design the inbox screen of our app. Let's have a look at it right here, just before I delete it, and we're gonna start from scratch. So let's get rid of it, and we're going to create a new artboard, which we're going to align next to the others. And now let's rename this artboard into inbox. And let's move back to our browse screen, where we're going to get the header, which we're going to reuse in the inbox screen as well. And while doing that, I'm going to show you one feature that we haven't seen yet, which is symbols. A symbol is an object which you can reuse multiple times across your document. And the cool thing about it is that whenever you make a change to one symbol, that change will be replicated to all the symbols used in your document. So we can have a look at how this works and select the header folder which we have in our browse screen, right click and make symbol, or Command K. As you can see now, there's a green border around the header and the layer folder has become a symbol. And also if we open the symbol panel by clicking on the icon down here, we can see the symbol that has been just created up here in the top. And now what we can do is to drag the header symbol from the symbols panel here into our inbox screen, and it will be duplicated here. And the cool thing about it is that if I want, for example, to change the position of the browse title, the page title, I can just change it, and the changes will be replicated in all the instances of this symbol. As you can see, the position change also here in the browse screen. Same thing for the icons, for example. If I'm going to change it and move it, it's going to be moved there as well. In our case though, what we want to do is just to change the title of the screen. So change it from browse to inbox. But as you can see, looking at the browse screen, also the title here gets changed because it's a symbol. So this doesn't work for us, and we just need to select again, the symbol here, right click and ungroup symbol. By doing that, all the layers that are forming this symbol will be basically released, as you can see if we select the layers panel, and they're just editable individually. So I can just select the browse title and change it to inbox, center it, and our change is done. So right now probably we need to select all these layers again and group them again, and just rename it to header again. As symbol overrides are not yet supported by Adobe, probably it would have been easier to just copy and paste the header into the inbox screen, but I just wanted to show you the symbols feature as I didn't do it earlier in the course. So now we can move on and select our artboard and change the fill, the background fill. We're just gonna grab the same color that we have in other screens. So now we're gonna select the rectangle tool and we're going to create the background for our messages. Just gonna create a big rectangle like this. Drag it all the way to the top and then go down by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pixels, maybe a little less, like this. And we're going to change the border using the same color of this line up here. And we're also going to lock the screen by using Command L. In this little section on top, we're gonna have our search bar, which we're going to create using another rectangle. We're going to change the border radius first of all to about 10 pixels and probably make it a bit longer. And let's zoom in a little bit. We change the border using the same gray here. And we're going to create some text, which we're going to position in the search box. We're going to change the font to Lato again. Put down the size to about 12 pixels. Change the color with the gray we already saved. And put down the opacity to about 50%. And obviously we're gonna move it in the center of the search box. And let's also add a little icon, which is gonna make things a bit clearer. As always, we're gonna take it from Font Awesome, and we have one right here, which is the search icon. We're gonna copy it, then use our text tool again, paste it, and change the font to Font Awesome. And still selecting it, we're going to Object, Convert to Path. I'm gonna move it in the search bar and make it a bit smaller, about this size. We change the fill to dark gray again. Remove the border and opacity down to 50. We select both of these layers and group them so that we can center them in an easier way. So now using the ellipse tool, we're going to draw a circle about 60 pixels, which is going to represent the user photo. We're going to remove the border and just change the color to a random color here. We're going to align it to the top and to the left and move it down by 20 pixels and move it to the right by 20 pixels. Then using our text tool, I'm going to type the username and change again to Lato, to our darker gray, and put it down to 16 pixels and probably make it also bold. Then we duplicate this and we make it a bit smaller, down to about 14%, change the weight to regular and change the opacity to 70%, and we just change the text we move it down a little bit and center it, and also move it 20 pixels from the image. Now we're going to duplicate this text again, and we're going to use it for the time, some random time like this. I'm going to move it by 20 pixels as well, and we're going to align it all the way to the right and make it a little smaller as well. And we'll decrease the opacity also to 50%. And we're going to create a separator line, which is gonna start from here on the left to here on the right. I'm going to change the color using this little gray here. And we're going to move it exactly 20 pixels from the top. Okay, so now we're gonna select all these layers here. Command G, we're gonna group them together. And we're going to rename the layer group to message. And actually we forgot to group these layers as well, so let's just do it now. And rename the layers to search bar. Now with the message layer group selected, we're going to select the repeat grid. Let's zoom out a little bit, and we're going to drag the handle all the way down so that we create a bunch of messages. And let's just make sure that distance between each item of the repeat grid is consistent with the 20 pixels that we've been using so far. So we select it, and when you see the little pink hover, we're just gonna drag it down and make sure that it's 20 pixels, which it already was, it seems like. And now we can start populating our repeat grid with some real content. And we can start by the photos, and to do that we can just open a folder where we saved all of our images of guys that are previously saved. So we select them and we simply drag them into the first circle up here, and Adobe XD will automatically populate all of the remaining circles included in our repeat grid with the photos of the guys I had saved. With the repeat grid we can do pretty much the same thing when it comes to text. As you can see here, I saved some usernames in a simple text file, and all I need to do is to click on top here next to the file title, file name, and drag this little icon into my XD screen on top of the username. And the username, as you can see, they are all getting replaced with the content that I had in my text file. So I can do the same with another text file where I have like some random messages here, and dragging this little icon here on top of the first message. There you go, everything gets replaced automatically. Let's do the same with the dates. As you can tell, this is a great time saver, and it's really easy to populate a repeat grid with some real content. Another aspect of repeat grids I really like is how easy you can make changes to the layouts that you just created. Let's say, for example, that this piece of text here is too close to the username on top, and actually it is. We can just move it down a couple of pixels, and as you can see, all the other elements are going to be dragged down as well. Same thing for the date, for example. I think we should move it up a little bit, and let's just nudge it up by 4 pixels. And all the dates in the repeat grid are going to be moved up. Alright, so now we just need to add some more details to the screen. For example, we can add a little online tag which shows which users are currently online. So let's zoom in a little bit, and let's use our rectangle tool to create a little rectangle here. Okay, we're gonna remove the border. And actually we're gonna change the color using the green that we already have here saved in our colors at the top of our document. So we're gonna use the color picker and select the green here. Okay, so back to our screen. We're going to round up the edges of this rectangle, just like this. And now we're gonna create some text. Oops. I'm gonna make it white and much smaller and bolder as well, actually black. And we move it on top, centering it in our online rectangle, and here it is. Okay, so let's get these two layers here and group them together and rename this to online tag, and we can actually replicate this and bring it down to another user, something like this. Alright, so now we can add a little unread message counter next to one of our users, which we actually already have here, so it's just a matter of copying and pasting it and move it down next to our second user. And we can actually change the number as well to a random 8. Okay. Then next we can add a little favorite icon, which we can get here as well, as we already have it. We're going to copy it and paste it back to our inbox. We're gonna make it smaller to about this size, move it on top here, and probably we can change the color to a yellow that we already have. Using a color picker, we're just gonna get it from here, and you can see it changed. Actually, it's a little bit too small. Maybe let's increase the size just a little bit, about this size, and that's okay. Okay, so the last thing to do is just tidy up our layers panel a little bit. We're going to minimize everything, move the header on top, move the search bar just under it, the repeat grid with all the messages here, and actually all of these elements here, they need to go on top. Let's group them in one unique layers group called chat elements, and we're gonna move it on top so that everything is visible. And that's it, our inbox screen is done. I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we'll design the settings screen for our app. You can see it right here. It's pretty simple and clean, and there's an interesting header here on top with some icons in the background. And actually you can see these icons I'm using right here on the right, and we just have them here saved, so it's gonna be easier for us to complete this design. So we're going to select all the elements that we have in our screen here, and we're just gonna get rid of it so we can start from scratch. First of all, let's rename this to just settings. And now we're going to add the header as we did in the previous lecture. And we did this by selecting it from the symbols panel here on the left. And what we need to do is just drag it here in our settings screen and position it correctly. And now we need to change the title of the screen from browse to settings. And as this is a symbol, we need to make sure that this change only happens in our instance here. So what we need to do, like we did in the previous lecture, is to ungroup the symbol. And now if we go back to our layers panel, we have all the individual layers here, which we're going to group again into a new folder, which we'll call header. And now by selecting just the browse text, we can simply change it into settings. Alright, so now we're gonna create a new rectangle, which we're gonna position just below the header. About this size. We're going to remove the border, change the color using our pink that we have saved here, and tune down the opacity a little bit so that we have a smoother kind of pink, about 80%. Okay, so now we can start creating the icon pattern, which we have here in the background. And I used all these icons you can see here to come up with that pattern, and then I just used a repeat grid. So let me show you how it's done. So we're gonna move back to Font Awesome, which is where I got most of the icons, and I'm going to get the first one of the list, and then the rest of the others we're just gonna take them from the icons we have in XD. So let's get this money icon here. We're gonna copy it, then we're going back to XD. We're going to use the text tool. We're gonna paste it, select it again, and change the font to Font Awesome. And as you can see now, we have our little icon there, but at the moment it's still a piece of text. So what we're gonna do is going to select it, object, and path, convert to path. So right now we basically have a vector shape which behaves exactly like a vector. So we're going to change the fill to white, and we're gonna position it here on top and nudge it a little bit on the left. And as you can see, it's very similar to the one we have here. So actually let's remove the border and we're done. Alright, so now we can start adding the other icons, and we're going to get them from here and just duplicate them. So Alt, click and drag back into our canvas here. And we're just going to position them a bit randomly, so that in the end we're going to create a pattern which we can replicate across the whole pink section we have here. Okay, so now we're going to lock this layer here. We're going to select all of these icons and we're gonna group them. Let's rename this to just icons. And then we'll select the repeat grid so that we can drag all the way to the right and basically fill up the space we have. And we can just decrease the spacing between the two instances that we just created to 0 pixels basically, or maybe a little more. Let's say 7 pixels. And it looks like this, which is pretty good. We're just going to select it again and put down the opacity until it looks quite visible, but not that much. So about 15%. I think that works. Alright, so now that our background is done, we can start putting in some text. I'm gonna change it to white, change the font to Lato, and put it to bold as well, and maybe decrease it a little bit. And we're gonna center it. Then we're going to duplicate it and write some more random text here. And we're gonna decrease the size and use a light font weight as well, and slightly decrease the opacity to about 90%. And we're gonna center it and position it just below the title on top. And now we're gonna create a button. So rectangle tool, and let's round up the borders, the corners, about 20 pixels. We're gonna remove the border here and center it. And now we're gonna create some text. So we duplicate this again, We're just gonna put it in the layers panel on top of the rectangle. I'm gonna change the text color right away using our pink. I'm gonna change it to bold and put down the size a little bit. And we just center it right in the middle of the button. Actually, this button seems a little too small for the text, so by holding the Alt key and dragging one of the handles, we're just gonna make it a little longer. As you can see, it increases the size on both sides of the rectangle. Okay, so now we're gonna go on and create the actual settings for this screen. So we're going to draw a rectangle down here. Make it a bit smaller. We're gonna remove the border and change the fill to our light gray that we already have here. And now we need to also create a little line that will separate the white from the gray. So we're gonna line it on top here, and we're going to use the same color of this line up here. And we're going to create some text as well. Actually, we can grab this text here and just duplicate it and put it down. We need to move it all the way up to the list of layers. So we're going to change the text, all caps. We're going to change the color as well. Put down the opacity to about 60%. And we want to change the font size as well down to 12. And also in this case, as Lato is a font that doesn't have a lot of space between characters when you are using all caps, it's probably better to increase this value and increase the spacing between characters. So with 100 it makes it just a little bit more readable, as you can see. So we're gonna grab this text, move it all the way to the left, and move it to the right by 20 pixels. And move it down a little bit as well. Okay, so now we're gonna draw another line, which is gonna be 335 pixels long. So that if we center it, it's gonna be 20 pixels from each side of the screen. Let's move it all the way up here and move it down by 60 pixels. And actually we need to change the color using the same color of this line we have up here. And let's create our text as well. Going to make it regular and put it down to 15 pixels and align it to the line here. We're going to duplicate this, align it to the right, change the text, decrease the size a little bit and change the color to our pink here. And actually let's move this up a little bit so that it's better aligned. Alright, so we're gonna select these layers here. We're gonna group them together. Let's rename it, and we're going to duplicate it and drag it down until we see the same distance between the upper part of the section. We select it again and we do it again. And now it's just a matter of replacing the text. Okay, so before moving on, we need to tidy up our layers panel a little bit, as it's quite messy right now. So let's move the header all the way to the top. Let's group this button here. And And let's group all the layers actually of the top part. I'm gonna move it just below the header. And we're gonna move these 3 layers as well. Okay, so now we're gonna select these 2 layer groups here. We're going to duplicate them and drag them down here. We actually need to get rid of this line here. And we're gonna duplicate this other line here and move it up. So we're going to get rid of this text here, and instead we need a little toggle that we're gonna get from the Apple iOS default UI kit already included in XD, and we can get it from here. So we just select it, copy it, and go back here and paste it. And we move it down here, aligned with the rest. And let's just change the color a little bit. Change the border as well, slightly darker gray. And align it with the line below. And now that we have this setting, we're going to select this group and duplicate it. And we're just gonna change this toggle here, move it on the other side, and change the main color to our blue here, and also the border. And now we just need to change the text here. Now let's just fix the alignments of some of our elements here, like this one here. And this text here as well, it's not properly centered vertically. And this one, which is the same. Alright, so I think it looks pretty good, and we're done with this screen, so I guess I'll see you in the next lecture.